Christmas morning at my childhood home in suburban Denver felt different this year. The familiar scent of pine needles and cinnamon rolls couldn't mask the tension crackling through our living room, like electricity before a thunderstorm. I sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, watching my chronically ill mother Patricia unwrap presents with trembling fingers, weakened by her ongoing health battles. The $200 spa gift certificate I had carefully chosen represented weeks of overtime shifts at Denver General Hospital, every penny scraped together with love and sacrifice. When my father Gerald intercepted the envelope and read the amount aloud, his scoff echoed through the room like a slap across my face. My sister Lena immediately announced that she pays $5,600 monthly for our mother's comprehensive care coverage, her voice dripping with superiority. Extended family members exchanged knowing glances while I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. The golden daughter versus the disappointing daughter dynamic crystallized in that moment, establishing the painful family hierarchy that would soon crumble spectacularly. Lena rose from the expensive leather armchair she had claimed as her throne, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light from our Christmas tree. At 31, she commanded attention wherever she went, her auburn hair styled in an elegant updo that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She reached into her designer purse and withdrew a thick leather portfolio, the kind executives carry to important board meetings, and placed it ceremoniously on the coffee table. I've prepared a comprehensive breakdown of my monthly contributions to Mom's care, she announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. The portfolio fell open to reveal meticulously organized spreadsheets, each page protected by clear plastic sleeves. Color-coded charts displayed her alleged payments for medical expenses, assisted living supplements, prescription coverage, physical therapy sessions, and even luxury comfort items like silk pajamas and premium lotions. Gerald leaned forward, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he studied the documents with the reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. "This is incredible, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice thick with paternal pride. "Look at this organization, Patricia. Our Lena has thought of everything." Patricia clutched Lena's hand with both of hers, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know how to thank you, honey. Without your generosity, I would never be able to afford the quality care I need. You've given me my life back." Cousin Martha whispered admiringly to Aunt Susan about Lena's recent promotion to Regional Marketing Director at Premier Marketing Solutions. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly when Lena mentioned her engagement to Thomas, a wealthy businessman who owned several successful restaurants in the Cherry Creek area. The conversation turned to her recent purchase of a 4-bedroom house in Highlands Ranch, complete with a 3-car garage and mountain views. I sat silently in the corner, my nursing school graduation certificate feeling like a worthless piece of paper in my purse. While Lena basked in the family's admiration, I thought about my own reality. I worked double shifts in the intensive care unit at Denver General, arriving before dawn and leaving long after sunset. My studio apartment in Capitol Hill was barely large enough for a bed and a desk, but it was all I could afford on my salary, after covering my own basic expenses. The contrast between our lives felt impossibly vast as I listened to Lena describe her upcoming vacation to Maui and her plans for a spring wedding at the luxurious Brown Palace Hotel. She spoke about choosing between BMW and Mercedes for her next car purchase while I took public transportation to save money on gas and parking fees. That afternoon, while helping clean up wrapping paper and dinner dishes, I stepped into the guest bathroom to splash cold water on my face. The humiliation of the morning had left me feeling drained and defeated. As I reached for a hand towel, a stack of papers slipped from the counter and scattered across the tile floor. I knelt to gather them up, glancing automatically at the letterheads and account numbers. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized bank statements from First National Bank, all bearing Lena's name and address. The numbers swimming before my eyes told a completely different story than the one she had presented so confidently to our family. Credit card balances exceeding $30,000, overdue loan payments highlighted in angry red ink, multiple accounts showing negative balances, collections notices from various creditors, late payment fees accumulating month after month. The pristine image of financial success rumbled before my eyes like a house of cards in a windstorm. My hands trembled as I realized that my seemingly perfect sister was drowning in debt, living a complete lie while our entire family celebrated her fictional generosity and success. Driving home that evening, through the quiet streets of Denver, the weight of my hidden truth pressed down on my chest like a physical burden. For 18 months, I had been living a secret that would shatter everything my family believed about our situation. The confession I had never spoken aloud echoed in my mind as I navigated the familiar route to my tiny apartment. I was the one covering Mom's entire medical care system. The journey had begun 2 years earlier when Mom's health insurance through Dad's employer was canceled due to company restructuring. She faced a terrifying gap in coverage just as her autoimmune condition was worsening, requiring expensive medications and specialist treatments that cost thousands of dollars monthly. While Dad scrambled to find alternative options and Lena made grand promises about helping out, I quietly researched every available program and policy until I found comprehensive coverage through a private provider. The monthly premium was $5,600 in amount that represented more than half of my take-home pay as a hospital nurse. To make it work, I picked up every available overtime shift, working 70 hours most weeks and sleeping only 4 hours each night. My diet consisted mainly of vending machine sandwiches and cafeteria leftovers from the hospital. I canceled my gym membership, streaming subscriptions, and any other non-essential expense. The automatic payments came directly from my emergency savings account, the one I had spent years building for my own future security. Each month, I watched that balance shrink while ensuring Mom received the premium health insurance she needed. I personally researched every medication, reading medical journals late into the night to understand potential interactions and side effects. I coordinated with her team of specialists, keeping detailed notes about appointment schedules and treatment progress. When Mom needed transportation to medical appointments, I arranged and paid for medical transport services. When her prescriptions required special handling, I drove across town to pharmacies that provided proper storage and delivery. When insurance claims were denied or delayed, I spent hours on the phone with customer service representatives, advocating for coverage and appealing decisions. I never told anyone about these arrangements because I wanted to protect Mom from the stress of knowing how much her care actually cost. I also hoped to avoid the family drama that would inevitably follow if Dad and Lena knew the truth about who was really providing financial support. Mom believed her insurance came through some special program connected to Dad's former employer benefits package, a story I had carefully constructed to preserve her peace of mind. The physical and emotional toll was devastating. I developed chronic headaches from exhaustion and stress. My social life disappeared completely as I worked constantly to maintain the payments. Colleagues at the hospital noticed my fatigue and offered help, but I couldn't explain the real reason behind my struggles without exposing the family secret. Every month, when I reviewed my bank statements, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and terror. Satisfaction because Mom was receiving excellent medical care that kept her comfortable and stable. Terror because I was slowly depleting my financial safety net with no clear plan for sustainability. The hardest part was watching Lena receive credit and gratitude for contributions she was never making while I remained invisible, working myself into the ground to keep our mother healthy and secure. Family gatherings became exercises in acting, pretending to struggle financially while secretly funding the very luxury care that everyone praised Lena for providing. But on December 23rd, 3 days before Christmas, everything changed. I arrived home after a particularly grueling shift to find a certified letter waiting in my mailbox. The return address belonged to Rocky Mountain Credit Union, and the contents made my blood run cold. My backup account had been frozen due to suspected fraudulent activity. The automatic payments that kept Mom's insurance active were about to stop. Without immediate intervention, her coverage would lapse within 72 hours, leaving her without access to the specialists and medications that had stabilized her condition over the past year and a half. The letter provided minimal details about the nature of the suspected fraud, referring only to unusual payment patterns and unauthorized access attempts. I was instructed to visit the branch manager immediately to resolve the situation and provide documentation proving the legitimacy of my account activity. As I stared at that letter in my dimly lit apartment, the full scope of my vulnerability became clear. I had sacrificed my own financial security to protect Mom's health, and now someone or something was threatening to destroy everything I had worked so hard to maintain. Monday morning arrived gray and bitter, with December snow beginning to fall as I hurried down 17th Street toward Rocky Mountain Credit Union. The branch opened at 9 o'clock sharp, and I was waiting outside when Beverly Thompson, the branch manager, unlocked the front doors. Her expression was serious but kind as she led me to her private office, the walls decorated with family photos and community service awards that spoke to her years of experience helping customers navigate financial difficulties. Miss Harriet. Beverly began settling behind her mahogany desk with a thick folder bearing my name. I appreciate you coming in so quickly. We've encountered some unusual activity on your backup savings account that triggered our fraud protection systems. She opened the folder to reveal printed transaction histories, account statements, and security reports that painted a troubling picture of my financial situation. The automatic payments for Mom's insurance had been exceeding my account balance for the past 3 months, triggering overdraft fees and forcing the bank to cover payments from a line of credit I didn't remember authorizing. Your primary checking account has been overdrawn multiple times, Beverly explained, highlighting entries with a yellow marker. When our system attempted to transfer funds from your backup savings to cover the insurance payments, it detected irregular patterns that suggested potential account compromise. The numbers swimming across the pages told a devastating story. My credit score had plummeted from 750 to 590 due to missed personal payments on my credit cards and student loans. I had been so focused on maintaining Mom's insurance that I had neglected my own financial obligations, allowing late fees and interest charges to accumulate month after month. But the most alarming revelation was yet to come. Beverly pulled up a computer screen showing detailed logs of account access attempts from an unknown IP address. Someone had been systematically probing my financial records, attempting to gather information about my income, expenses, and account balances. These access attempts began approximately 6 weeks ago, Beverly said, scrolling through timestamps and digital footprints. Someone has been trying to piece together a complete picture of your financial situation, using personal information that suggests inside knowledge of your family circumstances. She reached for another folder and withdrew security footage printouts from the branch's camera system. The black and white images showed a familiar figure approaching the customer service counter 3 weeks earlier. My blood ran cold as I recognized Lena's distinctive profile and expensive handbag. Your sister visited our branch on December 2nd. Beverly continued consulting her notes. She claimed to be verifying information for a family emergency loan application that listed you as a co-signer. Our representative followed proper protocol and declined to provide account details without your authorization, but she was quite persistent in her inquiries. The room began spinning as the implications sank in. Lena had been investigating my financial records, presumably trying to understand how I was managing my expenses on a nurse's salary. Her gambling debts and financial desperation had driven her to probe family members for potential sources of money or credit. Beverly's voice seemed to come from far away as she explained the next shocking discovery. She handed me a manila envelope containing photocopied loan documents from First National Bank, the same institution where I had seen Lena's account statements on Christmas Day. The paperwork showed a $60,000 personal loan application dated 3 weeks earlier. My signature appeared at the bottom of the co-signer agreement. I had never seen these documents before in my life. The handwriting was skilled enough to fool casual inspection, but subtle differences in letter formation and pen pressure revealed the forgery upon closer examination. Lena had used my personal information to secure a massive loan, gambling that I wouldn't discover the deception until after she had access to the funds. We flagged this application as potentially fraudulent and declined to process it, Beverly assured me, but the attempt to use your identity for unauthorized borrowing contributed to the alerts on your primary accounts. Our security systems interpreted the loan inquiry as evidence that your financial identity might be compromised. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. My own sister had been systematically trying to exploit my financial resources while positioning herself as the family's financial savior. She knew about my secret payments because she had been spying on my accounts, gathering intelligence for her own desperate schemes. Beverly handed me a stack of forms to report the identity theft and begin the process of clearing my credit record. The investigation would take weeks to complete, during which time my accounts would remain frozen and Mom's insurance payments would be suspended. As I signed document after document, my hand shaking with anger and disbelief, I realized that Lena's deception ran far deeper than simple gambling debts. She had been building a case against me, gathering evidence of my financial struggles to use as ammunition in some larger scheme I didn't yet understand. I drove directly from the bank to downtown Denver, my car weaving through traffic as my mind raced with questions and growing fury. Premier Marketing Solutions occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office building on 18th Street, the kind of corporate environment where Lena claimed to wield influence as a regional marketing director. The lobby featured marble floors and abstract sculptures that spoke to the company's success and prestige. Ashley, the young receptionist with bright purple hair and multiple ear piercings, looked up from her computer screen with practiced professionalism. "Good morning. How may I help you today?" "I need to speak with Lena Patterson immediately," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This concerns a family medical emergency." Ashley's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching for Lena's extension and current schedule. After several minutes of typing and phone calls, confusion creased her features. "I'm sorry, but I'm not finding anyone by that name in our current employee directory. Could you double-check the spelling or provide her department information?" My stomach dropped as another layer of Lena's deception unraveled before my eyes. She had been pretending to work at this company for months, maintaining the fiction of her marketing director position while actually being unemployed. The prestigious job that formed the foundation of her successful image was as fictional as her insurance contributions. She's tall auburn hair, usually wears expensive business suits. I pressed desperate to understand the scope of her lies. She mentioned being promoted to regional director recently. Ashley's expression grew more sympathetic. "Ma'am, I've worked here for 2 years, and I've never seen anyone matching that description in our marketing department. Are you certain she works at this location?" The marble lobby suddenly felt like it was closing in around me. I mumbled an apology and hurried back to the parking garage, my mind spinning with the implications. If Lena wasn't working at Premier Marketing Solutions, where did she go every day when she claimed to be at the office? How was she maintaining her expensive lifestyle without any legitimate income? I spent the next hour driving through downtown Denver, calling every Premier marketing company listed in the phone directory. None of them employed anyone named Lena Patterson. The elaborate professional facade she had constructed was completely fraudulent. Finally, I decided to try her cell phone directly. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice artificially cheerful in a way that now made my skin crawl. Harriet, what a wonderful surprise. I was just thinking about you after our lovely Christmas celebration. How are you feeling, sweetheart? I'm at Premier Marketing Solutions, I said, watching her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. The receptionist has never heard of you. Where are you really working, Lena? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before she spoke again, her tone shifting to something more defensive and calculating. There must be some confusion with the directory system. I work remotely most days now due to my promotion. Why don't we meet for coffee and discuss this misunderstanding? We agreed to meet at a Starbucks on Colfax Avenue, neutral territory, where I hoped to get honest answers about the banking fraud and forged loan documents. Lena arrived 20 minutes later, her appearance noticeably different from her polished Christmas presentation. Her makeup was hastily applied, her business suit wrinkled, and her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy that manifested in fidgeting hands and darting eyes. I placed the banking documents on the small round table between us, watching her reaction carefully. Her face went pale as she recognized the security footage printouts and loan applications bearing my forged signature. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, glancing around the crowded coffee shop as if expecting surveillance cameras or listening devices. "From my bank, where you tried to steal $60,000 using my identity," I replied, keeping my voice low but firm. "Beverly Thompson has security footage of you trying to access my account information. You've been spying on my finances for weeks." Lena's composure finally cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that drew concerned glances from other customers. When she finally looked up, her expression was raw with desperation and shame. "I'm in so much trouble, Harriet," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the coffee shop's background noise. "I owe some very dangerous people a lot of money. They've been calling constantly, threatening me and anyone connected to me if I don't pay up soon." The truth poured out in fragmented confessions. She had been gambling at Black Hawk casinos 4 nights a week for the past year, starting with small bets that gradually escalated to $1,000 poker games and high-stakes slot machines. What began as occasional entertainment had spiraled into a devastating addiction that consumed her savings, maxed out her credit cards, and eventually led to borrowing from loan sharks who operated outside the legal banking system. "I know about the insurance payments," she admitted, avoiding my eyes. "I've known for months that you're the one covering Mom's medical care. I plan to eventually take credit for the family's financial stability once I got back on my feet and could contribute something real." The betrayal was complete, but there was more. Lena revealed that she had been systematically laying groundwork to undermine my credibility within the family. She had been planting seeds of doubt about my mental stability, my financial responsibility, and my commitment to family obligations. "I told Dad that you've been acting erratic at work," she confessed, her words hitting me like physical blows. "I said your supervisors have been complaining about missed shifts and patient care violations. I suggested that you might be having some kind of breakdown and need professional intervention." The coffee shop around us faded into background noise as I realized the full scope of her manipulation. She had been preparing the family to question my competence and reliability, setting the stage for some larger scheme that would remove me as an obstacle to her plans. "There's going to be a family meeting tonight," Lena said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Dad wants to discuss your living situation and decision-making capacity. We're all concerned about your recent behavior and think you need help." The final piece of her strategy crystallized in my mind with terrifying clarity. She was orchestrating a scenario where the family would declare me mentally unstable and strip away my autonomy, potentially placing her in control of any financial resources or decision-making authority I possessed. As I sat in that noisy coffee shop, staring at my sister's tear-stained face and listening to her confession of calculated betrayal, I realized that everything I had believed about family loyalty and protection was built on illusions. The people I had sacrificed everything to help were preparing to destroy me based on lies designed to cover up gambling addiction and financial fraud. But I also realized something else. I was done being the invisible caregiver, the family scapegoat, the daughter who gave everything and received nothing in return. It was time to fight back with the truth, no matter how much it hurt or how dramatically it changed our family dynamics forever. The battle for my life and reputation was about to begin, and I intended to win. That evening, the house where I had grown up felt like a courtroom designed for my prosecution. Gerald had rearranged the living room furniture to create a formal semicircle facing the fireplace, where an empty chair waited like an electric chair for the condemned. Patricia sat wrapped in her favorite lavender blanket on the sectional sofa, her face drawn with worry lines that made her appear older and more fragile than her 62 years. The warm glow from the gas fireplace that had once provided comfort during childhood winters now cast ominous shadows across walls decorated with family photos that suddenly felt like evidence from happier times. Uncle Robert arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, his retired military bearing evident in his straight posture and serious expression. Aunt Susan followed closely behind, clutching a small notebook where she had apparently prepared talking points for the evening's discussion. Cousin Martha reluctantly took her place on the love seat, her discomfort obvious in the way she avoided making eye contact with me when I entered the room. Gerald stood at the center of the gathering like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. His gray hair was carefully combed, his button-down shirt pressed and tucked, lending an air of formality to what felt more like an intervention than a family conversation. He cleared his throat and began speaking in the measured tone he reserved for serious occasions. We've called this meeting because several family members have expressed genuine concerns about Harriet's recent behavior and mental state. He announced, consulting a handwritten list of topics. Lena has brought some troubling information to our attention regarding workplace incidents, financial irregularities, and concerning patterns of behavior that suggest our daughter may be experiencing a psychological crisis. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she addressed me directly. "Sweetheart, we love you so much, but we've noticed you've been withdrawn and acting strange lately. Lena showed us some emails from your supervisors describing problems at work. We're worried about you." Lena produced a manila folder from her oversized purse and distributed photocopied emails allegedly from nursing supervisors at Denver General Hospital. The documents described missed shifts, medication errors, conflicts with colleagues, and patient complaints that painted a picture of an employee in serious professional decline. My name appeared throughout the correspondence, along with detailed descriptions of incidents I had never experienced. As I scanned the fabricated emails, my hands began trembling with a combination of rage and disbelief. The writing style was consistent and professional, suggesting Lena had spent considerable time crafting convincing forgeries. She had researched hospital protocols, nursing terminology, and disciplinary procedures to create documents that would pass casual inspection from family members who had no medical background. "These communications came directly from your Human Resources Department," Lena explained, her voice dripping with false concern. "They're recommending immediate psychological evaluation and possible suspension pending a fitness for duty assessment. I thought the family should be aware of the situation before it escalates further." Uncle Robert leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face etched with worry. Harriet, I've seen this kind of deterioration before during my military service. Sometimes good people develop problems they can't see themselves. The best thing we can do is get you professional help before something tragic happens. Aunt Susan consulted her notebook and added, we've researched several excellent treatment facilities in the area. There are programs specifically designed for healthcare workers experiencing burnout and psychological stress. You wouldn't be the first nurse to need this kind of support. Gerald revealed that he had been researching involuntary commitment procedures and conservatorship laws, consulting with family attorneys about the legal steps necessary to protect someone who might be a danger to themselves or others. His research folders contain printouts about mental health, holds competency evaluations, and guardianship applications that made my blood run cold. The legal system provides mechanisms to help families intervene when someone lacks the capacity to make sound decisions about their own welfare. He explained, his voice taking on the clinical tone of someone who had memorized legal definitions. Colorado law allows family members to petition for temporary guardianship when clear evidence exists of mental incapacity or dangerous behavior. Patricia began crying harder as the conversation continued, genuinely believing that her daughter was suffering from some mysterious psychological breakdown that required immediate intervention. The woman I had been secretly protecting and supporting for 18 months was now participating in a scheme to strip away my autonomy and freedom. Cousin Martha finally spoke up, her voice reluctant but resigned. I don't pretend to understand all the medical and legal stuff, but if multiple people are seeing problems, maybe we should listen. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to recognize when someone needs help. The room felt like it was closing in around me as I realized the depth of Lena's manipulation. She had spent weeks, or possibly months, preparing for this moment, crafting false evidence and coaching family members to participate in what amounted to a coordinated psychological assault designed to make me question my own sanity and competence. But the most devastating moment came when Gerald pulled out a leather portfolio containing pre-drafted legal documents. The papers included power of attorney transfers, medical decision-making authorizations, and financial guardianship agreements that would effectively place my entire life under family control. We've prepared these documents for your own protection. Gerald explained, his tone suggesting he genuinely believed he was acting in my best interest. Once you're receiving appropriate treatment, you can focus on recovery without worrying about legal or financial responsibilities that might overwhelm you during this difficult period. Lena reached across the coffee table and placed her hand on mine with a gesture that appeared loving, but felt like a spider's touch. We just want you to get better, sweetie. None of us blame you for whatever has been causing these problems. Mental health issues can happen to anyone, and there's no shame in getting help. As I stared at the forged emails, fabricated medical reports, and pre-written legal documents scattered across the coffee table, I realized that this wasn't just about covering up gambling debts or financial fraud. Lena had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to gain control over my life, my finances, and my decision-making capacity, while positioning herself as a concerned sister acting in my best interest. The most chilling aspect was how thoroughly she had convinced our parents and extended family that her version of events was accurate. These people who had known me for 28 years were prepared to believe that I had suddenly developed serious mental health problems based entirely on fabricated evidence and manipulative storytelling. But I also recognized something else in that moment. I was watching my family reveal their true nature under pressure. Their willingness to accept lies about my character without giving me an opportunity to defend myself spoke to fundamental flaws in our relationships that had existed long before Lena's current crisis. The meeting was about to take an even more sinister turn, and I braced myself for whatever devastating revelation would come next. in this carefully orchestrated performance designed to destroy my credibility and autonomy forever. Gerald stood up and moved to the fireplace mantel where he had placed a small wooden gavel left over from his brief stint on the Homeowners Association board. The theatrical gesture would have been almost comical if the circumstances weren't so terrifying. He cleared his throat and called the meeting to order with the formality of a courtroom proceeding. Based on the evidence presented tonight and our collective concerns about Harriet's welfare, I believe we need to make some difficult decisions as a family. He announced, his voice carrying the weight of paternal authority. We have a responsibility to protect our daughter and sister, even if she can't see the need for intervention herself. Patricia shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, clutching her blanket tighter, as if it could shield her from the painful decision she was about to make. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her voice cracked when she spoke. I've been thinking about this all week ever since Lena first mentioned her concerns, she said, addressing the room rather than looking at me directly. I've noticed changes in Harriet's behavior during recent visits. She seems distant and preoccupied, almost like she's carrying some terrible burden she can't share with us. The irony of her observation was devastating. I had been carrying a terrible burden, but it was the financial weight of her medical care, not some psychological crisis requiring intervention. The distance and preoccupation she had noticed was the result of working 70-hour weeks and sacrificing my own well-being to keep her healthy and comfortable. Gerald called for individual statements from each family member regarding their position on my living situation and decision-making capacity. The process felt like a twisted version of a jury deliberation, with each person explaining their vote as if they were deciding the fate of a stranger rather than someone they claimed to love. Uncle Robert spoke first, his military background evident in his direct and pragmatic approach. I've seen too many good soldiers destroy themselves because they refused to accept help when they needed it most. Pride can be dangerous thing when it prevents someone from recognizing their own limitations. Based on the workplace incidents and behavioral changes described tonight, I believe Harriet needs immediate professional evaluation and a controlled environment where she can focus on recovery. Aunt Susan consulted her notebook again, reading from prepared remarks that suggested she had given considerable thought to her position. I've done research on mental health intervention strategies, and early action is always better than waiting for a complete breakdown. The employment issues alone indicate serious problems that could escalate into legal or safety concerns if left untreated. I support temporary guardianship until Harriet can demonstrate stable decision-making capacity. Cousin Martha looked deeply uncomfortable as her turn approached, fidgeting with her purse strap and avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. I don't feel qualified to make medical or legal judgments about someone else's mental health, she began hesitantly. But if multiple family members are seeing problems, and if there are workplace incidents documented by professionals, then maybe I should trust their assessment. I guess I agree that something needs to be done. Patricia's turn came next, and her emotional struggle was evident in every word. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke about her fears for my safety and well-being. I carried you in my body for 9 months and raised you for 28 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A mother's intuition tells her when something is wrong with her child, even when that child is grown up and living independently. I've been sensing your pain for months, but I didn't know how to help you. If this intervention saves your life or prevents you from hurting yourself or others, then I have to support it, no matter how much it breaks my heart. Gerald nodded solemnly at each statement, making notes on a legal pad as if recording official testimony. When the individual statements concluded, he announced that the family would vote on a formal resolution regarding my immediate future. The motion before us is that Harriet Patterson requires immediate removal from her current living situation and temporary suspension of her independent decision-making authority pending professional psychological evaluation. He declared, reading from a prepared statement that suggested considerable advanced planning. All those in favor of this resolution, please indicate your support. One by one, hands rose around the room. Uncle Robert's hand shot up immediately, followed by Aunt Susan's more hesitant gesture. Cousin Martha raised her hand slowly, her face twisted with reluctance and discomfort. Patricia's hand trembled as she lifted it, her sobs intensifying as she participated in what felt like a betrayal of her own daughter. Gerald's hand completed the unanimous vote, and he recorded the results on his legal pad with the finality of a court clerk documenting a verdict. The resolution passes by unanimous consent, he announced. Harriet Patterson will be required to vacate her current residence and submit to professional evaluation within 72 hours. But Lena wasn't finished with her performance. She reached into her purse again and withdrew a thick manila folder which she tossed across the coffee table with dramatic flair. The folder landed with a heavy thud, spilling its contents across the surface like evidence from a crime scene. I've taken the liberty of researching temporary housing options and treatment facilities, she said, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had been planning this moment for weeks. There are several excellent programs in the area that specialize in healthcare worker burnout and psychological crisis intervention. The folder contained apartment listings for furnished studios and extended stay hotels, along with brochures for residential mental health facilities and outpatient therapy programs. Everything was organized with the same meticulous attention to detail that Lena had applied to her fraudulent financial presentations. But buried beneath the housing information was something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Lena had prepared a restraining order application, complete with detailed allegations of threatening behavior, emotional instability, and potential violence toward family members. The legal document described incidents that had never occurred, conversations that had never taken place, and threats that existed only in Lena's imagination. According to her written statement, I had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior for months, including verbal aggression toward elderly parents, financial manipulation attempts, and veiled threats of physical violence if family members questioned my decisions. I didn't want it to come to this, Lena said, her voice filled with false regret as she gestured toward the restraining order paperwork. But if Harriet refuses to comply with our intervention voluntarily, we may need legal protection for Mom and Dad. Her behavior has been escalating, and I'm genuinely concerned about what she might do if she feels cornered. The restraining order application was dated three days earlier, revealing that Lena had prepared legal protection before the family meeting even took place. She had anticipated my potential resistance and crafted a narrative that would portray any attempt to defend myself as evidence of the dangerous mental instability she was alleging. Gerald picked up the restraining order documents and reviewed them with the same careful attention he had given to the employment records and treatment facility brochures. This is very thorough, Lena. It's clear you've put considerable thought into protecting the family while still trying to help your sister. As I sat in that living room, surrounded by people who had just voted to strip away my autonomy based on fabricated evidence, I realized that Lena's scheme was far more sophisticated than simple financial fraud. She had orchestrated a complete character assassination designed to isolate me from family support while positioning herself as the responsible daughter acting in everyone's best interest. But I also realized something else that would prove crucial in the battle ahead. Lena had made a critical error in her planning. Her overconfidence had led her to leave too many loose ends, too many contradictions, and too much evidence of her own deception scattered throughout her elaborate lie. The vote had been cast and my fate decided, but the war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Gerald consulted his watch and made one final announcement that sealed my immediate fate with bureaucratic precision. The family has voted, and our decision is final. Harriet, you have exactly 4 days to find alternative housing and remove your belongings from the family home. The deadline is Friday evening at 6 o'clock, after which time you will no longer be welcome on this property. The arbitrary nature of the timeline felt deliberately cruel, designed to create maximum stress and minimum opportunity for me to mount any effective resistance to their intervention plans. 4 days was barely enough time to find an apartment, arrange moving services, and transfer utilities, especially during the week between Christmas and New Year's, when most businesses operated on holiday schedules. Lena immediately volunteered her assistance with mock enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. "I'd be happy to help you pack your things and coordinate the logistics," she offered, her voice dripping with false sisterly concern. "I know this transition will be difficult, but I want you to know that the family is here to support you through this challenging time." Her offer to help pack was particularly nauseating given that she had orchestrated the entire situation that made packing necessary. The idea of having her handle my personal belongings while maintaining her facade of caring concern felt like adding insult to injury. Patricia continued sobbing quietly on the sofa, genuinely convinced that she was participating in a necessary intervention that would ultimately save her daughter's life. Her maternal instincts had been completely manipulated by Lena's careful presentation of fabricated evidence, turning her love and concern into weapons against the very person who had been secretly protecting her health and welfare for the past 18 months. "I'll miss having you here, sweetheart," Patricia said through her tears, reaching out to squeeze my hand with trembling fingers. "But I know this is what's best for you right now. Once you get the help you need, you can come home again, and we can be a real family." Gerald handed me a manila folder containing information about local psychiatric facilities and support groups, his expression a mixture of paternal concern and administrative efficiency. "I've contacted several treatment programs that specialize in healthcare worker burnout and psychological crisis management," he explained, highlighting specific brochures with yellow sticky notes. "Most of them have immediate availability and accept our insurance coverage." The folder also contained pamphlets about depression, anxiety disorders, and workplace stress management that Gerald had apparently collected from his family physician's office. His genuine belief that he was helping someone in crisis was almost more painful than if he had known the truth and chosen to participate anyway. Aunt Susan offered practical assistance with the transition logistics, suggesting storage facilities and temporary housing options that might ease the immediate crisis. "I know this feels overwhelming right now," she said kindly, "but sometimes these difficult transitions lead to positive changes that wouldn't have happened otherwise. You might discover that independent living helps you gain perspective on whatever has been troubling you." Uncle Robert provided his truck and trailer for moving purposes along with contact information for fellow veterans who operated moving services at discounted rates for family members. His military training in crisis management led him to focus on practical solutions rather than emotional processing. The key to any successful operation is proper planning and execution. He advised consulting his own notebook, where he had apparently sketched a timeline for the moving process. "If you start early and stay organized, you can accomplish everything you need to do within the 4-day window." As the family dispersed and began cleaning up the meeting materials, I felt completely isolated from the people who had once represented safety and belonging in my life. The house where I had grown up suddenly felt foreign and hostile, as if I were an intruder who had overstayed her welcome, rather than a daughter who belonged there. But as I walked through the familiar hallways toward my childhood bedroom, something caught my attention that would prove to be another crucial piece of evidence in Lena's elaborate deception. Hidden beneath my desk, barely visible unless someone was looking from exactly the right angle, was a small electronic device about the size of a matchbox. The device had a tiny red LED light that blinked every few seconds, suggesting it was actively recording audio or transmitting data to some external receiver. My blood ran cold as I realized that Lena had been conducting surveillance on my private conversations and activities, gathering intelligence that she could use to support her claims about my mental instability. I carefully photographed the hidden recording device without disturbing its position, documenting its location and technical specifications for future evidence. The discovery revealed another layer of Lena's premeditation and planning, proving that her concerns about my behavior weren't based on casual observation, but rather systematic spying designed to build a case against me. The recording device explained how Lena had been able to anticipate my reactions and prepare counter-arguments for scenarios that hadn't yet occurred. She had been listening to my private phone conversations, my interactions with roommates and colleagues, and my personal moments of stress and vulnerability. More importantly, the device proved that Lena's intervention wasn't motivated by genuine concern for my welfare, but rather by calculated manipulation designed to achieve some specific goal that required my removal from the family dynamic. As I lay in my childhood bed that final night, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars still marked constellations I had mapped as a 10-year-old, I began formulating a plan that would turn Lena's own tactics against her. If she wanted to play games with evidence and documentation, I would show her what real evidence looked like when assembled by someone who actually understood the difference between truth and fiction. The 4-day deadline was intended to break me, but it would instead become the time frame for gathering everything I needed to expose her lies and reclaim my life from the people who had chosen to believe fabricated stories, rather than trust the character of someone they had known for nearly 3 decades. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline winter clarity that makes Denver's mountain backdrop look close enough to touch. I called in sick to Denver General Hospital for the first time in 18 months, knowing that the next 3 days would determine whether I had a future to return to or whether Lena's fabricated crisis would destroy everything I had worked to build. My first stop was Rocky Mountain Credit Union, where Beverly Thompson had agreed to meet with me before regular business hours to discuss the fraud investigation and gather additional evidence about Lena's unauthorized activities. Beverly arrived at 7:30 with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a determination to help me understand the full scope of what had been happening to my financial identity. "I've been thinking about your situation all night," Beverly said, unlocking her office door and settling behind her desk with folders that had clearly been prepared in advance. Financial fraud cases involving family members are always complicated, but there are patterns here that suggest your sister's activities extend far beyond simple identity theft. She had spent her evening researching the IP addresses associated with the unauthorized access attempts on my accounts. The digital trail led to public computers at 3 different Black Hawk casinos, where Lena had apparently been conducting her surveillance activities between gambling sessions. The access pattern suggests someone who was desperately trying to piece together your complete financial picture, Beverly explained, highlighting timestamps on printed logs. She was looking for hidden assets, backup accounts, or credit availability that she could potentially exploit for her own purposes. Beverly also provided me with detailed records of every inquiry Lena had made during her December 2nd visit to the branch. She had asked specific questions about my employment verification account balances and potential co-signer eligibility for large personal loans. The questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of lending procedures that suggested previous experience with financial manipulation. After leaving the credit union with a manila envelope full of documentation, I drove to Capitol Hill to meet with someone who would prove instrumental in exposing Lena's broader pattern of deception. Daniel Rodriguez had been a patient in my ICU ward 6 months earlier, recovering from injuries sustained in a motorcycle accident that nearly ended his career as a private investigator. During his 3-week hospital stay, Daniel and I had developed the kind of bond that sometimes forms between healthcare providers and patients who face life-threatening situations together. His gratitude for the care I provided during his darkest moments had led to an ongoing friendship based on mutual respect and shared appreciation for second chances in life. You saved my life when that infection nearly killed me," Daniel said as we sat in his cluttered office above a used bookstore on Colfax Avenue. "I owe you more than I could ever repay, but helping you fight back against family betrayal seems like a good place to start." Daniel's investigation skills and professional contacts would prove invaluable in documenting Lena's gambling addiction and financial crimes. Within 2 hours, he had obtained surveillance footage from Golden Gates Casino showing Lena at poker tables 4 nights a week for the past 6 months, often staying until the early morning hours and losing significant amounts of money. The casino security manager, a former police officer named Carlos Mendez, recognized Lena immediately when Daniel showed him her photograph. "She's been on our problem gambler watch list for months," Carlos revealed during their meeting in his office overlooking the casino floor. "We've had to intervene several times when she became aggressive with dealers or other players after losing streaks." Carlos provided incident reports documenting Lena's increasingly erratic behavior during gambling sessions, including verbal confrontations with staff members, attempts to negotiate payment plans for losses, and meetings with unofficial lenders who operated in the casino parking lots after closing hours. These aren't legitimate business associates," Carlos warned, reviewing surveillance footage of Lena's parking lot meetings. "These are loan sharks who charge predatory interest rates and use intimidation tactics to ensure repayment. Your sister has gotten involved with some very dangerous people." The surveillance evidence revealed that Lena's gambling addiction had escalated far beyond casual entertainment into compulsive behavior that was destroying her financial stability and personal safety. Her claims about contributing to family medical expenses were obviously fabricated, given that she was losing thousands of dollars weekly at casino tables. But Daniel's investigation uncovered an even more shocking revelation about Lena's supposedly wealthy fiancé, Thomas. A background check revealed that Thomas Henderson was indeed a successful restaurant owner, but he was also married to Rebecca Martinez, a Denver attorney with whom he had been living for the past 8 years. "Thomas has been running a sophisticated romance scam," Daniel explained, showing me photographs and documentation from his investigation. "He targets women with gambling problems who are desperate for financial rescue, promises them marriage and financial security, then uses their personal information and credit access to launder money through fake business accounts." The romantic relationship that formed the foundation of Lena's claims about upcoming wedding plans and financial security was actually a criminal enterprise designed to exploit her vulnerability and desperation. Thomas had no intention of marrying Lena or providing financial assistance with her gambling debts. Instead, he had been using her personal information to establish fraudulent business accounts that allowed him to move money from his legitimate restaurants through shell companies that existed only on paper. Lena's identity was being used to create fake invoices, phantom employees, and fictitious business transactions that helped Thomas hide income from his wife and business partners. "She's not just a victim of romance fraud," Daniel concluded, reviewing bank records and corporate filings that revealed the scope of the money laundering operation. "She's become an unwitting participant in federal crimes that could result in serious prison time if discovered by law enforcement." By Thursday afternoon, Daniel had compiled a comprehensive report documenting Lena's gambling addiction, her involvement with loan sharks, her participation in money laundering schemes, and her complete lack of legitimate employment or income. The evidence painted a picture of someone whose life had spiraled completely out of control while she maintained elaborate facades to hide her desperation from family members. The investigation also revealed that Lena's intervention against me wasn't just about covering up her personal problems. She was being pressured by loan sharks who were threatening to expose her illegal activities unless she found ways to access additional money or credit through family connections. My removal from the family dynamic would eliminate the person most likely to discover her crimes while positioning her as the responsible family member qualified to make financial decisions on behalf of aging parents with substantial assets and home equity. But Danielle's most important discovery came Thursday evening when he traced the corporate registration for Premier Marketing Solutions and discovered that Lena had indeed worked there until 3 months earlier. Her termination had resulted from embezzlement allegations involving $60,000 in missing client funds that coincided exactly with her gambling losses during the same time period. She wasn't just fired for theft. Daniel explained, reviewing employment records and criminal complaint documents. The company filed charges with the Denver Police Department for felony embezzlement. There's an active warrant for her arrest that hasn't been served yet because she's been successfully avoiding law enforcement. As Thursday night turned into Friday morning, I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by evidence that would completely destroy Lena's credibility and expose her elaborate lies to our family. But I also realized that I held the power to protect or destroy someone whose addiction and desperation had led her down a path toward federal crimes and personal devastation. The question was whether I wanted justice or revenge, and whether there was any difference between the two when dealing with someone who had tried to destroy my life to cover up her own mistakes. The answer would determine not just Lena's fate, but the kind of person I wanted to be when this family crisis finally reached its inevitable conclusion. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear with the kind of mountain sunrise that made Denver's skyline gleam like a promise of new beginnings. I had spent the night organizing 18 months of financial records, medical correspondence, and insurance documentation that would prove my secret role in maintaining our mother's healthcare system. The evidence I compiled painted a detailed picture of sacrifice and dedication that stood in stark contrast to Lena's fabricated narrative of family contribution. Every bank statement showed automatic withdrawals timed precisely with Patricia's medical appointments and prescription refills. Every insurance claim bore my policy number and payment confirmations from my personal accounts. The most powerful documentation came from Patricia's medical team at Denver Health Medical Center, where Dr. Sarah Chen had been overseeing her autoimmune treatment protocol for the past 2 years. Dr. Chen agreed to provide official letters detailing the dramatic improvement in Patricia's condition since the high-quality insurance coverage had been established in June of the previous year. Mrs. Patterson's health outcomes have been remarkable since she gained access to comprehensive coverage, Dr. Chen wrote in her formal statement. The consistency of her insurance benefits has allowed us to implement an aggressive treatment plan that would have been impossible under standard coverage limitations. Her current stability is directly attributable to uninterrupted access to specialty medications and preventive care services. The medical records showed a clear correlation between my secret insurance payments and Patricia's improved quality of life. Her emergency room visits had decreased by 70%. Her prescription compliance had improved to nearly perfect adherence. Her specialist consultations had increased from quarterly crisis interventions to monthly maintenance appointments that prevented serious complications. Dr. Chen's documentation was supported by letters from Patricia's rheumatologist, cardiologist, and physical therapy team, all confirming that the patient's care continuity had been exceptional throughout the coverage period. The medical professionals had no knowledge of the payment source, but their records proved that someone had been ensuring consistent premium-level healthcare access. At Rocky Mountain Credit Union, Beverly Thompson provided certified copies of every fraudulent document Lena had attempted to process, along with security footage from her unauthorized visits and detailed logs of her digital surveillance activities. The bank's fraud investigation had uncovered additional evidence of Lena's systematic attempt to compromise my financial identity. She made 11 separate inquiries into your accounts over a 6-week period. Beverly explained, reviewing timestamps and digital records. The pattern suggests someone who was methodically gathering information for a specific purpose rather than casual curiosity about family finances. Beverly's documentation included printed emails between Lena and various lending institutions, where she had been attempting to use my employment information and credit history to secure loans for amounts ranging from $20,000 to $80,000. My nursing salary and stable employment record made me an attractive co-signer target for someone whose own credit had been destroyed by gambling debts. From Denver General Hospital, I obtained employment records spanning my entire tenure as an ICU nurse. Human Resources Director Margaret Foster provided a comprehensive letter detailing my work performance, overtime hours, and patient care accommodations that directly contradicted every allegation in Lena's fabricated supervisor emails. Ms. Patterson has been one of our most reliable and dedicated nursing staff members, Margaret wrote in her official statement. Her patient care evaluations consistently exceed expectations, and her willingness to work additional shifts has made her invaluable during staffing challenges. We have no record of any performance issues, disciplinary actions, or concerning incidents involving her professional conduct. The employment documentation included specific performance reviews, patient satisfaction scores, and peer evaluations that painted a picture of exceptional professional competence and personal reliability. Margaret also noted that my overtime hours had increased dramatically over the past 18 months, coinciding exactly with the period when I had been secretly funding Patricia's medical care. Daniel Rodriguez delivered his private investigation report Friday afternoon, a comprehensive file that documented every aspect of Lena's hidden life and criminal activities. The report included surveillance footage from multiple casinos' financial records, showing the scope of her gambling losses and evidence of her involvement with loan sharks and money laundering operations. Oh, and your sister has been living a complete fiction for almost a year, Daniel explained, reviewing the key findings with me in his office. Every aspect of her successful professional image is fabricated, while her actual situation involves federal crimes that could result in decades of prison time. Daniel's investigation had also uncovered the romance scam involving Thomas Henderson, providing documentation of his existing marriage and evidence of the money laundering scheme that had ensnared Lena as an unwitting participant. The criminal conspiracy extended beyond gambling debts into areas that could destroy her life permanently if discovered by federal authorities. But the most significant documentation came from an unexpected source. Mr. Harold Peterson, the landlord who owned the family home where I had grown up, called me Friday morning with information that would expose another layer of Lena's deception about family financial responsibilities. I've been meaning to thank whoever has been making those additional payments, Mr. Peterson said during our phone conversation. The anonymous cashier's checks have been arriving monthly for over a year, always for exactly $1,500, and they've kept your family's mortgage current during some difficult financial periods. Mr. Peterson explained that Gerald's retirement income hadn't been sufficient to cover the mortgage payments since his employer pension had been reduced 18 months earlier. Without the mysterious supplemental payments, the family would have faced foreclosure proceedings that had actually been initiated the previous month when the anonymous contributions suddenly stopped. I assumed the payments came from someone in the family who preferred to help quietly, Mr. Peterson continued. But when I contacted your father about the missing payments, he seemed genuinely surprised to learn they had been happening at all. I had been secretly contributing to the family mortgage through anonymous cashier's checks, protecting Gerald's pride while ensuring that Patricia wouldn't lose her home during her health crisis. Like my insurance payments, this contribution had been invisible to the family members who benefited from my sacrifice. Mr. Peterson agreed to provide official documentation of the payment history, including copies of all the cashier's checks and correspondence related to the foreclosure proceedings that would begin immediately if the payments weren't resumed. His records would prove that Lena's claims about family financial stability were completely false. As Friday afternoon turned into evening, I arranged all the documentation in chronological order, creating a comprehensive timeline that would expose every lie Lena had told and every truth she had concealed. The evidence filled 3 large binders with sections for medical records, financial documentation, employment verification, and criminal investigation findings. The manila envelope I prepared for Gerald contained everything he needed to understand how thoroughly he had been manipulated and how dramatically he had misjudged both of his daughters. The evidence would destroy Lena's credibility completely while vindicating my character and proving my dedication to family welfare despite receiving no recognition or appreciation for my sacrifices. But as I sealed that envelope and prepared to deliver the most devastating revelation of Gerald and Patricia's lives, I realized that victory would come with its own painful consequences. The truth would shatter their trust in Lena while forcing them to confront their own willingness to believe fabricated stories about a daughter who had never given them reason to doubt her character. The family meeting that had stripped away my autonomy and dignity would be revealed as a tragic mistake based on elaborate lies, but the damage to our relationships might prove irreparable regardless of who was vindicated by the evidence. Still, as I placed that confidential envelope on Gerald's desk and prepared for the confrontation that would change everything, I knew that protecting myself from further manipulation was worth whatever pain the truth might cause to people who had chosen deception over trust when it mattered most. Friday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, I walked through the doors of Rocky Mountain Credit Union with the determination of someone who had finally decided to stop being a victim of other people's lies and manipulation. Beverly Thompson was waiting for me with the fraud investigation paperwork that would formally revoke every unauthorized transaction Lena had attempted to process using my identity. "I want to freeze everything," I told Beverly, settling into the chair across from her desk with a stack of legal documents Daniel had helped me prepare. Every automatic payment, every authorization, every piece of access she might have gained to my accounts. I want it all stopped immediately. Beverly's fingers flew across her keyboard as she began the process of revoking the automatic payment authorizations that had been sustaining Patricia's insurance coverage for the past 18 months. Each cancellation required multiple confirmations and security verifications, but within an hour, the financial lifeline I had been providing was completely severed. The insurance company will receive notification of payment method changes within 24 hours. Beverly explained, printing confirmation receipts for each canceled authorization. They'll need new payment arrangements from the policyholder or an authorized representative to maintain coverage continuity. The most satisfying moment came when Beverly initiated fraud protection protocols for the $60,000 loan Lena had obtained using my forged signature. The bank's security department would contact law enforcement within 48 hours to report identity theft and document forgery, triggering criminal investigations that would follow Lena for years, regardless of how the family situation resolved. Wow, once we file these fraud reports, there's no going back. Beverly warned, reviewing the legal implications of the formal complaints. Your sister will face criminal charges for identity theft, forgery, and potentially conspiracy to commit bank fraud. These are felony charges that carry serious prison sentences. I signed every document without hesitation, knowing that Lena's criminal behavior needed consequences that extended beyond family disappointment and temporary embarrassment. She had committed federal crimes that threatened other people's financial security, and allowing her to escape prosecution would only enable future victims to suffer similar betrayals. From the credit union, I drove directly to the offices of Consolidated Health Insurance, the company that provided Patricia's comprehensive medical coverage. Claims representative Janet Morrison met with me in a sterile conference room decorated with motivational posters about wellness and prevention that felt ironically appropriate given the circumstances. Mr. Patterson will need to provide new payment authorization within 72 hours to prevent coverage lapse. Janet explained, reviewing the policy details on her computer screen. The automatic payments that have been maintaining this account will stop processing after today's business hours. Janet showed me the payment history that revealed the true scope of my financial commitment to Patricia's healthcare. The monthly premiums of $5,600 had been supplemented by additional payments for prescription copay specialist consultations, medical equipment, and transportation services that brought my actual monthly contribution to nearly $8,000. This is one of our most comprehensive policies, Janet noted, highlighting the coverage benefits that had kept Patricia stable and comfortable throughout her illness. Without these premium payments, Mrs. Patterson will lose access to her specialist care team prescription coverage and preventive services. She'll be limited to basic emergency coverage through Medicare, which won't support the treatment protocols that have been managing her condition. I requested official documentation of every payment I had made, along with a detailed breakdown of the medical services Patricia had received as a direct result of my financial support. The insurance company's records would provide irrefutable proof of my hidden contributions to family welfare while exposing Lena's complete lack of actual involvement in Patricia's care management. My next stop was Sunrise Assisted Living Community, where Patricia received physical therapy, nutritional counseling, and social services that supplemented her home care routine. Business Office Manager Robert Chen reviewed my account information with growing concern as he realized the implications of my payment cancellation. Mrs. Patterson's service plan will be suspended immediately if we don't receive alternative payment arrangements, Robert explained, consulting the facility's billing policies. She's currently enrolled in our premium care package, which includes twice-weekly physical therapy, daily medication management, and emergency response services that cost $1,800 monthly. I had been paying for these supplemental services without anyone in my family knowing they existed. Patricia believed the assisted living benefits came through some senior citizen program Gerald had discovered, when in fact I had been researching and funding every aspect of her extended care network. Robert provided documentation showing the dramatic improvement in Patricia's mobility and independence since she had begun receiving professional physical therapy and nutritional support. Her fall risk had decreased significantly, her medication compliance had improved to perfect adherence, and her overall quality of life had increased measurably during the 18-month period when my payments had supported her care. My final stop was the most emotionally difficult but strategically necessary. I drove to the modest ranch house where Gerald and Patricia had lived for 37 years, the place where I had grown up believing that family meant unconditional love and support during times of crisis. Mr. Harold Peterson met me in his office above Peterson Property Management, a family business that had been serving Denver landlords and tenants for 3 generations. Harold was a kind man in his 70s who had treated our family with patience and compassion during Gerald's employment transitions and Patricia's health crises. "I've been worried about your parents since those mortgage supplements stopped coming." Harold admitted, pulling up account records on his computer. "Your father's retirement income covers about 60% of the monthly mortgage payment. Without the additional $1,500 that's been arriving anonymously, they're facing foreclosure proceedings that I really don't want to initiate." Harold showed me copies of every cashier's check I had sent over the past 14 months, along with correspondence documenting Gerald's financial struggles and the family's vulnerability to losing their home. The foreclosure notice had been prepared but not yet served, pending Harold's hope that the anonymous benefactor would resume payments. I assume someone in the family was helping quietly to avoid embarrassing your father, Harold explained, reviewing the timeline of payments and missed payments. But when I called Gerald yesterday to discuss payment arrangements, he seemed genuinely shocked to learn that someone had been supplementing the mortgage for over a year. I requested copies of all mortgage-related documentation, including the foreclosure notice that would be served within days if payments weren't resumed. Harold agreed to provide everything along with a written statement confirming the family's complete dependence on my anonymous contributions for maintaining housing stability. Your father is a proud man who's been struggling with the financial changes that come with retirement and medical expenses. Harold observed printing the documents I had requested. I suspect learning about these secret payments will be difficult for him, regardless of how grateful he might feel about the help. As I drove away from Harold's office with 3 bankers' boxes full of documentation, I felt the weight of 18 months of sacrifice and secrecy settling into a new configuration. Instead of carrying the burden of protecting everyone else's comfort and pride, I was finally placing responsibility where it belonged. The automatic payments that had sustained Patricia's healthcare were stopped. The insurance company would demand new payment arrangements from Gerald within 72 hours. The assisted living facility would suspend Patricia's services immediately. The mortgage company would begin foreclosure proceedings on the family home. By Monday morning, the financial foundation of their comfortable retirement would crumble completely, forcing Gerald and Patricia to confront the reality of their dependence on the daughter they had voted to remove from their lives. But I also knew that my actions would cause Patricia to suffer the loss of medical care that had kept her stable and healthy for the past year and a half. The ethical complexity of using her vulnerability as leverage against family manipulation created moral tensions that I would have to live with regardless of how the situation resolved. Still, as I prepared for the revelation that would expose everything Lena had hidden and everything I had sacrificed, I reminded myself that truth and consequences were inseparable. If my family wanted to make decisions about my life based on lies and fabricated evidence, they would have to face the reality of their choices when those lies were finally exposed. The nuclear option had been activated, and by tomorrow morning, everyone would understand exactly who had been protecting whom throughout this entire devastating family crisis. Friday afternoon unfolded with the methodical precision of a carefully orchestrated revelation that would shatter every assumption my family had made about loyalty, responsibility, and truth. Gerald's phone began ringing at 2:15 with a call from Mountain View Insurance Company, where customer service representative Amanda Walsh needed to discuss urgent authorization issues regarding Patricia Patterson's coverage continuation. Gerald answered the phone while Patricia rested on the living room sofa, still believing that her insurance came through some mysterious benefit program connected to his former employer. His confused responses to Amanda's questions about policy ownership and payment sources created the first crack in the foundation of lies that Lena had built around our family's financial situation. "I don't understand what you mean by alternative payment arrangements," Gerald said, his voice carrying the bewildered tone of someone discovering that reality didn't match his assumptions. "My wife's insurance has been handled automatically for the past year and a half. There must be some mistake in your billing department." Amanda's patient explanation about payment source changes and authorization requirements left Gerald staring at Patricia with growing confusion. He had no knowledge of policy numbers, premium amounts, or coverage details because he had never been involved in managing Patricia's insurance arrangements. While Gerald struggled to understand the insurance situation, his phone rang again. This time, the caller was Janet Morrison from the Assisted Living Facility's business office, calling to discuss service suspension protocols for Mrs. Patterson's premium care package. Service suspension. Gerald repeated his confusion, deepening as Janet explained the $1,800 monthly cost of Patricia's physical therapy, medication management, and emergency response services. I don't know anything about premium care packages. My wife attends some kind of senior center program, but I thought that was provided through Medicare. Patricia looked up from her magazine with growing alarm as Gerald's conversations revealed care services and payment obligations she had never understood. The comfortable illusion that her medical care was being provided through government programs or employer benefits began cracking as the reality of private payments and premium services became apparent. The most devastating call came at 4:30 when Harold Peterson arrived at the house with foreclosure documentation that couldn't be explained away or ignored. Harold's gentle but firm explanation about mortgage payment shortfalls and anonymous supplements created a moment of financial reckoning that Gerald had been avoiding for over a year. Anonymous supplements. Patricia whispered, her face pale with shock as Harold showed them copies of monthly cashier's checks that had been keeping them in their home. Harold, what are you talking about? Gerald's retirement income has been covering our house payments. Gerald's proud facade finally crumbled as Harold explained that the retirement income had never been sufficient for mortgage obligations, and that someone had been quietly preventing foreclosure proceedings through anonymous contributions that had suddenly stopped arriving. I've been hoping the payments would resume, Harold said kindly, recognizing the family's distress. But I can't delay the foreclosure process any longer. You have until next Friday to bring the account current or make alternative arrangements. As Harold left the house with promises to call before initiating legal proceedings, Gerald and Patricia sat in their living room, surrounded by insurance notices, medical bills, and foreclosure warnings that revealed the complete fiction of their financial security. I don't understand any of this, Patricia said, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. How can we owe so much money? How can our insurance be canceled? I thought everything was stable. Gerald reached for his phone to call Lena, hoping she could explain the sudden cascade of financial crises that seemed to be erupting simultaneously. But Lena's phone went directly to voicemail, and her office number at Premier Marketing Solutions produced only a recorded message about holiday closures and limited availability. That evening, while Patricia tried to process the reality of losing her medical care and potentially her home, Gerald began searching through desk drawers and filing cabinets for financial documents that might explain their situation. His discovery of insurance policies, medical bills, and payment records revealed a pattern of financial support that had been invisible to him for over a year. Every insurance claim bore policy numbers he had never seen before. Every medical service showed payment confirmations from accounts he didn't recognize. Every specialist consultation had been coordinated and funded through systems he had never established or managed. The growing realization that someone else had been managing Patricia's entire medical care network led Gerald to examine the family's other financial obligations with new scrutiny. Bank statements showed mortgage payment shortfalls that he had somehow failed to notice or address. Utility bills revealed supplemental payments that had prevented service interruptions during months when his retirement income fell short of household expenses. As Friday evening darkness settled over Denver, Gerald sat at his kitchen table with 18 months of financial evidence spread before him, like pieces of a puzzle that created a picture he wasn't prepared to see. Someone in the family had been providing massive financial support while allowing him to believe he was managing household obligations successfully. His first instinct was to assume Lena had been helping, secretly maintaining her generous contributions while protecting his pride through anonymous arrangements. But when he called her workplace again, the automated directory system had no listing for anyone named Lena Patterson in any department. Gerald's growing confusion about Lena's employment status coincided with his discovery of medical and insurance documentation that created an impossible financial timeline. The care services Patricia had been receiving cost far more than Lena's alleged salary could support, even if she had been contributing her entire income to family medical expenses. As he sat in his quiet kitchen, surrounded by evidence of financial complexity he had never understood, Gerald noticed the manila envelope marked confidential that I had left on his desk during my final visit to collect personal belongings. The envelope was thick and heavy, suggesting substantial documentation rather than a simple goodbye letter. Gerald's name was written in my careful handwriting, along with a note that read, "The complete truth about family finances and medical care arrangements. Open when you're ready to understand what has really been happening." Gerald stared at that envelope for 20 minutes, knowing instinctively that its contents would either provide answers to his confusion or create even more devastating revelations about the family crisis that was destroying everything he thought he understood about responsibility, loyalty, and truth. Patricia called from the living room, asking if he had been able to reach Lena or figure out the insurance situation. Her voice carried the fear of someone who was beginning to realize that her health and housing security might be far more fragile than she had believed. Gerald picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in his hands like evidence in a trial where he was both judge and defendant. Whatever I had documented in that package would change everything, but the financial crisis erupting around them demanded answers that Lena seemed unable or unwilling to provide. He opened the envelope and began reading the most comprehensive and devastating truth any family could discover about sacrifice, deception, and the difference between appearance and reality when love and desperation collide in the most painful ways possible. Gerald's hands trembled as he opened the manila envelope and withdrew 18 months of meticulously organized documentation that would expose the complete truth about family loyalty, sacrifice, and financial deception. The evidence was arranged in chronological order with section dividers and explanatory notes that guided him through a story of dedication and betrayal that defied everything he thought he knew about his daughters. The first section contained bank statements from my personal accounts showing automatic payments of $5,600 monthly to Mountain View Insurance Company, along with additional payments for prescription coverage, specialist consultations, medical equipment, and transportation services that brought my total monthly contribution to nearly $8,000. Each bank statement was accompanied by corresponding medical records that proved the direct correlation between my payments and Patricia's improved health outcomes. Dr. Sarah Chen's detailed treatment notes showed how consistent insurance coverage had enabled aggressive therapy protocols that would have been impossible under standard Medicare limitations. Gerald's retirement income was barely $3,000 monthly, making it mathematically impossible for him to have covered Patricia's medical expenses while maintaining household obligations. The insurance coverage that had kept Patricia stable and comfortable for the past year and a half had been entirely funded by my nursing salary and overtime earnings. "This can't be right," Gerald whispered to himself, reviewing payment confirmations that showed my automatic withdrawals coinciding exactly with every medical appointment Patricia had attended. "Harriet's been paying for everything this whole time." The second section documented my secret contributions to the family mortgage through anonymous cashier's checks that had prevented foreclosure for over a year. Harold Peterson's records showed 14 consecutive monthly payments of $1,500 that had bridged the gap between Gerald's retirement income and actual housing expenses. Without my anonymous mortgage supplements, Gerald and Patricia would have lost their home months earlier. The comfortable retirement lifestyle they had been enjoying was entirely dependent on financial support from the daughter they had just voted to remove from their lives based on fabricated evidence of mental instability. The third section contained Dr. Chen's comprehensive medical assessment of Patricia's improvement since gaining access to premium insurance coverage. Her emergency room visits had decreased from monthly crisis interventions to 0 in the past 6 months. Her prescription compliance had improved to perfect adherence through automated pharmacy services that I had researched and arranged. She's been taking care of Mom this whole time. Gerald realized, his voice breaking as the scope of my sacrifice became clear. While we thought Lena was contributing thousands of dollars, Harriet was actually paying for everything and working herself into the ground to afford it. The fourth section exposed Lena's complete fabrication of workplace communications through side-by-side comparisons of her forged emails with authentic correspondence from Denver General Hospital. Margaret Foster's official employment verification showed my exemplary performance record, consistent overtime hours, and patient care commendations that directly contradicted every allegation Lena had invented. The forged emails were revealed as elaborate fiction designed to create justification for family intervention and removal of my decision-making authority. Every incident Lena had described was completely fabricated, supported by no evidence beyond documents she had created using stolen hospital letterhead and employee directory information. Gerald's growing horror at the scope of Lena's deception was compounded by his discovery of Daniel Rodriguez's private investigation report documenting her gambling addiction, unemployment criminal charges, and involvement with federal money laundering schemes. The successful professional image she had presented to the family was a complete fantasy designed to hide devastating personal problems. Surveillance footage from Golden Gates Casino showed Lena losing thousands of dollars weekly at poker tables while claiming to contribute to family medical expenses. Her employment at Premier Marketing Solutions had ended 3 months earlier due to embezzlement allegations involving $60,000 in missing client funds that coincided with her gambling losses. She stole money from her employer, Gerald said aloud, reading Daniel's report with growing disbelief. She's been unemployed for months while pretending to go to work every day. Everything she told us about her success and contributions was completely fake. The most devastating revelation came in the final section, which documented Lena's systematic identity theft attempts and her involvement with loan sharks and romance scammers who had been using her personal information for criminal financial schemes. Beverly Thompson's fraud investigation showed 11 separate attempts to access my credit and banking information for loan applications I had never authorized. Thomas Henderson, Lena's supposed wealthy fiancé, was exposed as a married man running money laundering operations through fake business accounts that used Lena's identity without her knowledge. The romantic relationship that had impressed the family was actually a criminal conspiracy that could result in federal charges for both participants. Gerald read through page after page of evidence, while Patricia dozed fitfully on the living room sofa, unaware that her comfortable medical care had been entirely funded by the daughter they had just banished from the family home. Every specialist appointment, every prescription, every therapy session had been possible only because I had sacrificed my own financial security to protect her health and comfort. The hidden recording device I had discovered in my bedroom was documented with photographs and technical specifications that proved Lena's systematic surveillance of my private conversations. She had been gathering intelligence about my financial struggles and personal vulnerabilities to support her fabricated claims about my mental instability. She's been spying on Harriet for months. Gerald realized, reviewing timestamps that showed surveillance activities coinciding with her gambling sessions at Black Hawk casinos. She planted recording equipment in our house to gather evidence for her lies about Harriet's behavior. As Gerald absorbed the complete scope of my 18-month sacrifice and Lena's systematic deception, Patricia stirred on the sofa and called out to ask if he had learned anything about their insurance situation. Gerald looked at his wife of 40 years, knowing that her comfortable retirement and stable health care had been entirely dependent on the secret generosity of the daughter they had just forced out of their lives. The vote they had taken to protect Harriet from her own alleged mental instability was revealed as a tragic mistake based on elaborate lies designed to hide criminal behavior and gambling addiction. "Patricia," Gerald said softly, walking into the living room with the evidence folder in his hands, "we need to talk about what's really been happening in our family. And then we need to figure out how to apologize to a daughter who might never forgive us for what we've done." The revelation was complete, but the damage to family relationships and personal trust might prove irreparable regardless of who was vindicated by the truth. Gerald and Patricia were about to confront the most painful lesson any parent can learn, that their capacity for love and judgment could be manipulated by lies while rejecting the truth offered by someone whose character they should never have questioned. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline winter beauty that made Denver look like a postcard, but Gerald and Patricia drove through the familiar streets toward my Capitol Hill apartment with hearts heavy with shame and desperate hope for forgiveness. Patricia clutched a bouquet of white roses in her trembling hands, the same flowers she had brought to my high school graduation and nursing school ceremony, now offered as inadequate symbols of regret and love. Gerald had spent the night reading and rereading every page of evidence I had compiled, his disbelief gradually transforming into horrified understanding of how completely he had failed as a father and protector. The daughter he had trusted was revealed as a criminal and liar, while the daughter he had rejected was shown to be the most loyal and sacrificial family member any parent could hope to have. "I don't know how to face her," Patricia whispered as they climbed the narrow staircase to my second-floor studio apartment. "She's been taking care of me this whole time, and I voted to throw her out of our family. What kind of mother does that to her own child?" They found my apartment door standing open with moving boxes stacked in the hallway and the sound of packing tape being applied to cardboard containers. I was calmly wrapping my medical textbooks in newspaper, having enrolled in an advanced nursing program at Oregon Health and Science University that would begin in 3 weeks. "Harriet," Gerald said softly from the doorway, his voice breaking with emotion he rarely displayed, "may we please come in and talk with you?" I looked up from my packing with an expression of calm resignation that somehow hurt them more than anger or tears would have. My apartment was nearly empty, except for essential furniture and the systematic organization of belongings into labeled boxes that suggested careful planning rather than hasty flight. "I assume you found the envelope," I said, continuing to pack books without looking at them directly. "I'm sorry you had to learn the truth in such a devastating way, but Lena's lies made it impossible for me to explain the situation gradually or gently." Gerald stepped into the small room and immediately broke down crying, his shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from some deep well of paternal grief and shame. "I failed you so completely," he whispered, sinking into my desk chair like a man whose strength had been completely depleted. "I didn't protect you from your sister's manipulation, and I didn't recognize the daughter who had been sacrificing everything to keep our family together." Patricia placed the white roses on my kitchen counter and approached me with the careful movements of someone who feared rejection but desperately needed connection. "Sweetheart, I don't know how to apologize for what we did to you. You've been my guardian angel for 18 months, and I believed lies about you instead of trusting the character I should have recognized after 28 years." The conversation that followed was emotionally devastating for all of us, as Gerald and Patricia struggled to understand how they had been so thoroughly deceived, while I tried to process the reality that my own family had been willing to strip away my autonomy based on fabricated evidence from someone whose criminal behavior they had never suspected. The employment records, the medical documentation, the financial evidence. Gerald said, reviewing the key points that had exposed Lena's deception. "Everything you provided was verifiable and official, while everything Lena showed us was fabricated. How could we have been so blind to the difference between truth and lies?" I explained how Lena's systematic surveillance and identity theft had given her detailed knowledge of my financial struggles, allowing her to craft convincing narratives that exploited the family's existing assumptions about responsibility and success. Her gambling addiction and criminal involvement had made her desperate enough to destroy family relationships in pursuit of financial relief. She knew exactly which buttons to push, I said, sealing another box of nursing journals and textbooks. You wanted to believe that Lena was successful and generous because it validated your parenting and made you feel proud. You wanted to believe I was struggling because it fit the pattern of me being the less accomplished daughter who needed help rather than provided it. Patricia's tears flowed continuously as she listened to my explanation of 18 months spent working 70-hour weeks, sleeping 4 hours nightly, and surviving on vending machine meals to maintain their comfortable retirement and her stable health care. The physical and emotional toll of my sacrifice had been invisible to people who should have noticed my exhaustion and appreciated my dedication. I never wanted credit or recognition. I continued folding clothes into a suitcase with methodical precision. I wanted Mom to be healthy and comfortable without worrying about costs. I wanted Dad to feel successful in providing for his family. I was willing to work myself into the ground to preserve your peace of mind. Gerald offered to reverse everything immediately, promising to force Lena to face consequences for her criminal behavior and to publicly acknowledge my sacrificial support of family welfare. He begged me to stay in Denver and allow them to rebuild our relationship based on truth and mutual respect rather than deception and manipulation. But I had already accepted a position at Oregon Health and Science University's teaching hospital in Portland, along with enrollment in their advanced nursing program that would lead to a master's degree in critical care nursing. The job came with a signing bonus of $25,000 that would secure my financial independence and allow me to start fresh in a place where family dysfunction couldn't follow. I need to build a life that isn't dependent on people who can be convinced to reject me based on lies. I explained, showing them the employment contract and university acceptance letters that represented my escape from the toxic family dynamics that had nearly destroyed my autonomy and reputation. I love you both, but I can't trust that this won't happen again the next time someone decides to manipulate your emotions or exploit your assumptions about my character. Patricia begged me to reconsider, promising that they would never again doubt my integrity or accept accusations about my behavior without giving me an opportunity to defend myself. Gerald offered to pay for counseling, family therapy, and whatever professional support might help heal the damage that had been done to our relationships. The problem isn't that you made a mistake, I said, sitting on my bed and looking at them with the calm clarity that comes from making difficult but necessary decisions. The problem is that you were willing to believe the worst about me instead of the best, even though I had never given you reason to doubt my character or question my love for this family. As Saturday afternoon turned toward evening, Gerald and Patricia finally accepted that their apologies, while genuine and heartfelt, couldn't undo the fundamental betrayal of trust that had occurred when they chose to believe fabricated evidence over their knowledge of my true nature. They left my apartment with the understanding that our relationship would need to be rebuilt slowly and carefully based on their demonstrated change in judgment and behavior, rather than promises or good intentions. The damage to family trust might eventually heal, but it would require years of consistent respect for my autonomy and recognition of my worth. As I watched them drive away from my window, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief that comes from finally protecting yourself from people who love you, but don't necessarily value you enough to defend you when it matters most. Lena returned to the family home Saturday evening, expecting to find celebration of her successful intervention and removal of the troublesome sister who had been threatening her elaborate schemes. Instead, she discovered Gerald and Patricia waiting in the living room with evidence of her deception spread across the coffee table like exhibits in a criminal trial. while two Denver police officers sat quietly in the corner chairs, reviewing identity theft reports that would change her life forever. Detective Mariah Santos looked up from her notebook as Lena entered through the front door, her expensive purse and designer clothing creating a stark contrast with the reality of her unemployed status and crushing debt obligations. Miss Patterson, we need to discuss some financial irregularities that have been reported by Rocky Mountain Credit Union and several other institutions. Lena's face went pale as she recognized bank documents, surveillance photographs, and fraud investigation reports that exposed every aspect of her criminal behavior and systematic deception. The confident facade she had maintained throughout months of manipulation crumbled instantly when confronted with irrefutable evidence of identity theft, forgery, and embezzlement. "I don't understand what this is about," Lena said weakly, setting down her purse with trembling hands. "There must be some mistake or confusion with the bank records." Detective Santos consulted her notes and began reading from a list of charges that would destroy any hope Lena might have had for escaping consequences through continued lies or family protection. Identity theft, forgery of financial documents, embezzlement from Premier Marketing Solutions, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. These are federal crimes that carry mandatory minimum sentences. Gerald's voice was cold and distant as he addressed the daughter whose manipulation had nearly destroyed his family's trust and stability. "We know about the gambling, Lena. We know about the loan sharks, the romance scam, the money laundering, and the unemployment. We know about every lie you told and every crime you committed while pretending to be our successful, generous daughter." Patricia couldn't even look at Lena directly, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke about the betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound could have inflicted. "You tried to convince us that your sister was mentally ill and dangerous, while she was working herself into the ground to pay for my medical care and keep us in our home. You almost destroyed the most loyal and loving daughter any family could ask for." The most devastating moment came when Detective Santos revealed that Thomas Henderson, Lena's supposed wealthy fiancé, had been arrested earlier that morning for money laundering and romance fraud involving multiple victims across 3 states. His cooperation with federal investigators had exposed Lena's unwitting participation in criminal financial schemes that extended far beyond her gambling debts. Mr. Henderson provided detailed testimony about using your personal information to establish fraudulent business accounts. Detective Santos explained, showing Lena bank records and corporate filings that proved her involvement in federal crimes. Whether you participated knowingly or not, your identity was used to launder approximately $200,000 through fake business transactions over the past 6 months. Lena's romantic relationship with Thomas was exposed as an elaborate criminal conspiracy designed to exploit women with gambling problems who were desperate for financial rescue. The upcoming wedding she had described to the family was fictional, and the financial security she had expected from marriage was actually deeper involvement in federal crimes that could result in decades of prison time. The loan sharks who had been pressuring Lena for payment had also been contacted by law enforcement after Daniel Rodriguez's investigation revealed their illegal lending practices and intimidation tactics. Their threats against family members would be prosecuted as extortion, but their confirmation of Lena's debts provided additional evidence of her desperate financial situation. "You owe approximately $87,000 to illegal lending operations." Detective Santos continued consulting reports from the Organized Crime Unit. "These creditors have been using intimidation tactics against your family members, which constitutes criminal extortion under Colorado and federal law." Gerald announced that he would not provide financial assistance for Lena's legal defense debt resolution or any other consequences resulting from her criminal behavior and systematic deception. The daughter who had manipulated family emotions and exploited parental trust would face the full legal consequences of her actions without protection or support from people she had betrayed so thoroughly. "You're not welcome in this house anymore," Gerald said with finality that surprised even himself. "You've lost the right to be considered part of this family through your own choices and criminal behavior. We won't help you protect you or enable you to hurt anyone else the way you've hurt your sister and parents." Patricia's response was even more devastating in its quiet devastation. "I don't know who you are anymore, Lena. The daughter I thought I raised would never have done these things to her family or to her sister who was sacrificing everything to help us. You've become someone I don't recognize, and I don't want you in my life until you can prove that you've changed completely." As Detective Santos prepared to escort Lena to the police station for formal booking and arraignment, she made one final desperate attempt to manipulate family emotions through tears and pleas for forgiveness that no longer carried any credibility with people who had learned to distinguish between genuine remorse and calculated performance. "I was desperate and scared," she sobbed, looking around the room for any sign of sympathy or weakness that might provide an opportunity for continued manipulation. "The gambling got out of control, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." But her pleas fell on deaf ears, hardened by months of lies and the devastating realization that their trust and love had been weaponized against the family member who deserved protection rather than persecution. Gerald and Patricia watched silently as Detective Santos led Lena away in handcuffs, knowing that justice was finally being served, but feeling no satisfaction in witnessing the destruction of someone they had once loved unconditionally. The house felt different after Lena's arrest, as if her removal had lifted a toxic presence that had been poisoning family relationships for months. Gerald and Patricia began the difficult process of understanding how they had been manipulated while planning how to rebuild trust with the daughter whose loyalty and sacrifice they had nearly destroyed through their willingness to believe lies over truth. But even as justice was being served and family dynamics were being corrected, they knew that some damage might be irreparable, regardless of how thoroughly Lena's deception had been exposed or how sincere their remorse might be about the terrible mistakes they had made in judgment and trust. 3 months later, spring arrived in Portland with the kind of gentle warmth that makes the Pacific Northwest feel like a promise of new beginnings and second chances. I stood in the break room of Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, looking out at the Willamette River while drinking coffee before my shift in the trauma intensive care unit, where I worked with patients whose lives had been shattered by sudden crisis and who needed advocates who understood how quickly everything could change. My phone buzzed with its weekly call from Patricia, whose health had stabilized remarkably under the care plan that Gerald now managed with proper budgeting, insurance coordination, and deep appreciation for the medical support systems that kept her comfortable and independent. Their relationship had been slowly rebuilding through honest conversations that acknowledged both the damage that had been done and the genuine love that still existed beneath the layers of hurt and betrayal. The physical therapy is going wonderfully." Patricia reported, her voice stronger and more optimistic than it had been during the months when she unknowingly benefited from my secret financial support. "Dr. Chen says my mobility improvement has been remarkable since Gerald started coordinating my care properly, and the insurance situation is completely resolved now that we understand all the requirements and procedures." Gerald had transformed from a proud man who avoided financial reality into someone who actively managed household obligations with spreadsheets, payment schedules, and emergency savings that would prevent future crises. His retirement planning now included accurate assessments of medical costs and housing expenses that reflected their actual needs rather than his assumptions about what they could afford. "I've been going to counseling every week," Gerald added when Patricia handed him the phone, his voice carrying the humility that comes from recognizing fundamental character flaws that require ongoing work to address. The therapist says family dynamics can be changed, but it takes consistent effort to build new patterns of trust and communication. I want you to know that I'm committed to becoming the father you deserve to have during this crisis. Family therapy had helped Gerald understand how his favoritism toward Lena and his assumptions about success and responsibility had created vulnerabilities that allowed manipulation to flourish while genuine loyalty went unrecognized and unprotected. Patricia had learned to question information sources and trust her own instincts about people's character rather than accepting explanations that seemed convenient or flattering. We received the final legal notice about Lena's sentencing. Patricia continued her voice, carrying the complex emotions that accompany justice for someone you once loved unconditionally. 18 months in federal prison for the financial crimes plus 5 years of supervised probation and mandatory gambling addiction treatment. She'll also have to make restitution to the victims of the money laundering scheme. Lena's legal consequences had been severe but fair, reflecting the serious nature of her crimes, while providing opportunities for rehabilitation and eventual redemption if she chose to pursue genuine change rather than continued manipulation and deception. The romance fraud charges against Thomas Henderson had resulted in much longer sentences, and his cooperation with authorities had helped prosecute other criminals who exploited vulnerable women through fake relationship schemes. She's been writing letters asking us to visit, Gerald said carefully, understanding that my feelings about Lena's situation were complicated by both justice and family history. We're not ready for that yet, and we wanted you to know that we won't have any contact with her until you feel comfortable with whatever relationship might be possible in the future. This consideration for my emotional welfare represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics where my comfort and security were being prioritized over other people's guilt manipulation or demands for immediate forgiveness. Gerald and Patricia had learned that rebuilding trust required respecting my boundaries rather than pressuring me to participate in reconciliation timelines that served their needs more than mine. My new life in Portland had exceeded every expectation I had held when fleeing the family crisis that nearly destroyed my autonomy and reputation. The trauma ICU position challenged my clinical skills while providing emotional satisfaction that came from helping patients and families navigate medical crises with dignity and hope. My colleagues respected my experience and dedication without needing to know the personal struggles that had taught me about resilience and advocacy. The advanced nursing program was equally rewarding, offering opportunities to specialize in critical care management and potentially pursue teaching positions that would allow me to train other nurses in patient advocacy and family communication. The academic environment provided intellectual stimulation and professional relationships based on shared interests rather than family obligation or guilt. I'm proud of the life you've built there, Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion that reflected both regret about the past and genuine admiration for my strength in creating an independent future. When I see how well you're doing, I know that leaving Denver was the right choice, even though it breaks my heart that our family problems drove you away. Most importantly, I had learned to distinguish between love and loyalty, between family obligation and family health, and between protecting other people's comfort and protecting my own well-being. The boundaries I had established weren't walls designed to punish anyone, but rather healthy limits that preserved my ability to maintain relationships without sacrificing my own security or autonomy. I've been thinking about visiting for your birthday in June, I said, testing the possibility of gradual reconnection based on demonstrated change rather than promises or expectations. Not to move back or resume old patterns, but to see if we can build something new based on mutual respect and honest communication. The conversation ended with expressions of love that felt genuine but cautious, acknowledging both the damage that had been done and the possibility that time, consistency, and genuine change might eventually heal relationships that had been shattered by deception and manipulation. As I prepared for my shift in the trauma unit, I reflected on the life lesson that had emerged from 18 months of secret sacrifice, followed by devastating betrayal and eventual vindication. True family loyalty isn't about enabling destructive behavior or sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate your value. It's about supporting each other honestly while maintaining boundaries that protect everyone's dignity and autonomy. The patients I would care for during my shift had also learned that lesson through medical crises that tested their relationships and revealed the difference between people who supported their recovery and those who complicated it through their own needs and agendas. My experience with family manipulation had made me a better advocate for patients whose vulnerability was being exploited or whose recovery was being undermined by toxic family dynamics. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to refuse to enable their harmful behavior while protecting yourself from people who claim to love you but don't value you enough to defend you when it matters most. Setting boundaries isn't about punishment or revenge, but about creating space for genuine healing and change to occur naturally over time. The trauma ICU would present new challenges and opportunities to make a difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. My family situation had taught me that survival often requires the courage to choose your own well-being over other people's expectations, and that true strength comes from building a life based on your own values rather than other people's approval or manipulation. As I walked toward the elevator that would take me to another day of meaningful work with people who valued my skills and dedication, I felt grateful for the painful lessons that had taught me the difference between being needed and being valued, between family obligation and family respect, and between protecting others and protecting yourself in relationships that claim to be based on love but actually depend on sacrifice and silence. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people you love when their behavior was harming your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about finding the balance between supporting family members and protecting your own mental health and financial security. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with others who might benefit from hearing about the importance of recognizing manipulation and valuing your own worth in family relationships. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, family dynamics, and finding the courage to choose yourself when it matters most. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you deserve to be valued and protected by the people who claim to love you. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable harmful behavior while building a life that honors your own worth and potential for happiness.